What if the most exhausting thing you have ever done, the thing that has quietly drained you year after year, was never even your fight to begin with? There is a particular kind of tired that sleep does not fix. You know the one. It is not the tired that comes from working hard towards something that matters to you. That kind of tired is almost sweet, it carries the satisfaction of effort, the quiet pride of someone who spent themselves on something worthy. No. This is a different kind of tired entirely. This is the tired that comes from pouring yourself, your time, your energy, your emotional reserves, your mental bandwidth, your very identity, into battles that were never yours. Into people who never asked you to fight for them the way you did. Into situations that consumed everything you had and returned almost nothing. Into a version of loyalty and love and responsibility that somehow always seemed to cost you everything and cost everyone else nothing at all. This tired lives in the body. In the shoulders that never fully drop. In the jaw that is always slightly clenched. In the sleep that comes but never fully restores. In the low, persistent hum of depletion that has been the background frequency of your life for so long that you have started to mistake it for your personality. It is not your personality. It is the accumulated cost of fighting for everyone except the one person who needed you most. Yourself. And today, right here, we are going to talk about what it actually means to fight for yourself. Not the Instagram version. Not the surface level, bubble bath, treat yourself version that has been packaged and sold as self-care. The real version. The one that requires courage and clarity and the willingness to disappoint people who have grown very comfortable with your self-abandonment. Stay with me. This one is going to ask something of you. The war you are fighting that nobody assigned you. Let us start with something that might be uncomfortable to hear. Most of the battles you are exhausted from were voluntary. Not in the sense that you chose them consciously. Not in the sense that you woke up one morning and decided to spend the next decade fighting for everyone else's peace while yours quietly eroded. But voluntary in the deeper sense, in the sense that there was always a choice available to you, even when the conditioning of a lifetime made that choice feel impossible. The conditioning is real. I want to honor that. Many of us were shaped, from very early ages, into people who equate our worth with our usefulness to others. We were praised when we helped. We were approved of when we sacrificed. We were called good, and being called good felt like being called safe, being called loved, being called worthy of staying, and so we built our entire identity around the one behavior that reliably produced that feeling. We fought for other people. We became the person everyone called in a crisis. The one who showed up, who figured it out, who held it together when everyone else fell apart. We became the emotional backbone of our families, our friendships, our workplaces. We became so fluent in other people's needs that we forgot we had a language of our own. And the world, the people in our lives, responded to this the way people always respond to an unlimited resource. They used it. Not always maliciously. Not always consciously. But consistently, and without particular guilt, because we had never given them reason to feel guilty. We had never shown them the cost. We had kept showing up, kept giving, kept fighting, and the message that sent, whether we intended it or not, was that the supply was endless. It is not endless. It was never endless. And somewhere underneath the exhaustion and the resentment and the persistent low-grade sadness that follows you from room to room, you already know that. The story of the woman who held up the bridge. I want to tell you about a woman named Adiz. Adiz was the kind of person that families are built around. Not because she demanded that position, she never demanded anything, but because she was simply so capable, so reliable, so deeply committed to the people she loved, that over time, without anyone formally deciding it, she became the structural support of everyone around her. Her mother called her first in every crisis. Her siblings routed their problems through her before making any significant decision. Her friends knew with absolute certainty, that Adiz would pick up the phone at any hour. Her colleagues leaned on her institutional knowledge, her patience, her willingness to absorb the overflow of everyone else's limitations. Adiz held up the bridge. For 15 years, she held up the bridge. And for 15 years, the bridge stood. And everyone who crossed it daily, who relied on it without thinking, the way you rely on infrastructure without thinking, went about their lives without ever considering what it might cost to hold that much weight for that long. Then one Tuesday morning, Adise did not get out of bed. Not because she was sick. Not because anything dramatic had happened. But because her body, which had been sending increasingly urgent signals for years that she had been too busy holding up bridges to hear, simply refused to continue. She lay there for 3 days. And in those 3 days, something remarkable happened. Or rather, something remarkable did not happen. The crises that arose were handled. The problems that emerged were solved. The people who had built their stability on her availability discovered, with some surprise, that they were more capable than they had believed. The bridge did not fall. Because the bridge had never actually needed Adise to hold it up alone. It had simply never occurred to anyone, including Adise, to ask the other people standing on it to help carry the weight. This is the story of the person who fights for everyone. Not that the fighting is wrong. But that it is almost always unilateral in a way that was never examined, never negotiated, never consciously chosen, by anyone involved. And when Adise finally got out of bed on that 4th day, she made a decision that changed the architecture of her entire life. She decided to fight for herself with the same ferocity she had spent 15 years fighting for everyone else. Not instead of everyone else. But before everyone else. As the foundation from which everything else would be given, or not given, on her own terms. What fighting for yourself actually means. Because here is where I need to be very precise, because this concept gets misunderstood in ways that cause real harm. Fighting for yourself does not mean becoming selfish in the shallow, taking without giving sense of the word. It does not mean withdrawing your love or your care or your genuine investment in the people who matter to you. It does not mean becoming cold, or hard, or the kind of person who moves through life indifferent to the needs of others. What it means, what it actually, practically, daily means, is this. It means treating your own life with the same seriousness, the same urgency, the same fierce protective energy that you have been directing outward for years. It means your dreams get the same quality of attention that you give to other people's problems. It means your peace gets defended with the same conviction that you defend other people's feelings. It means your time gets protected with the same care that you extend to other people's schedules. It means your needs get acknowledged, out loud, without apology, without the lengthy justification that you would never demand from someone else, with the same validity that you automatically extend to everyone around you. The Stoics had a word for this quality of self-relationship. They called it oikeiosis, the appropriate and right relationship with oneself, from which all other right relationships extend. Not self-obsession. Not narcissism. But the grounded, honest, non-negotiable understanding that you are a person, a full, complete, valuable, irreplaceable person, whose life deserves to be fought for. Epictetus, who was born into slavery and had every external freedom stripped from him, built an entire philosophy on the one territory no one could take, his inner life, his values, his relationship with himself. He wrote with the authority of someone who had tested this in the most extreme possible conditions. And what he concluded, what 2,000 years of human experience since has continued to confirm, is that the person who does not fight for themselves eventually has nothing left to fight with. You cannot pour from empty. You cannot give from bankrupt. You cannot love freely when you are drowning in the cost of loving without limit. Fighting for yourself is not the opposite of fighting for others. It is the prerequisite. The 4 ways we abandon ourselves without realizing it. I want to get specific here. Because self-abandonment is rarely dramatic. It is rarely a single decision. It is the accumulation of 1,000 small ones, each of which seemed reasonable, even virtuous, in isolation, that adds up, over time, to a life that barely resembles the one you actually wanted. The first way is the abandonment of your time. Time is not abstract. Time is your life, literally, materially, the substance of your one existence on this earth. Every hour is a piece of your life that you will not get back. And yet most people who fight for everyone else treat their time as the most readily available resource for distribution, the thing that gets allocated to everyone's needs before their own are even considered. You say yes to things you do not want to do because the discomfort of saying no feels worse than the cost of saying yes. And that calculus, repeated daily, for years, produces a life where almost none of your time is spent on what actually matters to you. Where the projects you care about live permanently in the future. Where the life you actually want keeps getting postponed for everyone else's present. Your time is not a public resource. It is the most private, most finite, most non-renewable thing you possess. Fighting for yourself begins with fighting for your hours, deciding, with intention and without excessive apology, how they will be spent. The second way is the abandonment of your voice. The person who fights for everyone else becomes extraordinarily skilled at reading other people's needs, other people's comfort, other people's reactions, and calibrating their own expression accordingly. They develop a kind of constant, low-level self-censorship that operates so automatically they no longer experience it as censorship. They just experience it as consideration. As tact. As maturity. But there is a difference between thoughtful communication and the systematic suppression of your own truth in order to manage other people's comfort. And that difference becomes visible in the moments when something needs to be said, when something crosses a line, when something costs you more than you can afford, when something is simply wrong, and instead of speaking, you swallow it. Every swallowed truth is a small abandonment of yourself. And small abandonments, practiced consistently over years, produce a person who has become a stranger to their own voice. Fight for your voice. Not recklessly. But honestly, and without the preemptive guilt that has been conditioning you into silence. The third way is the abandonment of your dreams. This one is the quietest and the most devastating. Because dreams do not die loudly. They do not announce their departure. They fade, gradually, almost imperceptibly, as the practical demands of everyone else's life consistently take priority over the impractical, inconvenient, deeply personal thing that you actually came here to do. You wanted to build something. Create something. Become something that felt true to the deepest version of who you are. And that wanting got filed, year after year, under later. When things settle. When the kids are older. When work is less demanding. When everyone else is okay. But everyone else is never fully okay. The settling never fully comes. And later keeps moving further away as the years keep passing. Your dreams are not a luxury to be pursued after everyone else's needs are met. They are the point. They are the reason you are here. Fighting for yourself means fighting for them, with the same urgency, the same fierce refusal to let them go, that you bring to every battle you fight for everyone else. The fourth way is the abandonment of your standards. When you spend years fighting for everyone else, something subtle but significant happens to your standards. You begin to tolerate things, in relationships, in environments, in the way people speak to you and treat you and value your time, that you would never tolerate if they were happening to someone you loved. You accept less than you deserve because asking for more feels like being difficult. You remain in situations that diminish you because leaving feels selfish. You allow people to cross lines, repeatedly, because calling it out feels like creating conflict, and you are the person who avoids conflict, who keeps the peace, who absorbs the cost of other people's behavior so that the surface of things can remain smooth. But smooth surfaces built on your suppressed standards are not peace. They are performance. And the cost of that performance is paid entirely by you. The Stoic case for fighting for yourself. Marcus Aurelius was one of the most powerful men in human history. Emperor of Rome at the height of its reach, commander of armies, administrator of millions of lives. And he spent his private hours, in the journals that became his meditations, doing something that might surprise you. He was fighting for himself. Not for Rome. Not for his legacy. Not for the approval of the people under his authority. But for the quality of his own mind, his own character, his own alignment between his values and his daily actions. He wrote to himself, sometimes harshly, sometimes with great tenderness, the way a person writes to someone they are deeply committed to not losing. Confine yourself to the present. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. These are not the words of a man who was indifferent to others. Marcus Aurelius was by most historical accounts a deeply conscientious, compassionate, duty-bound person. But embedded in everything he wrote is the understanding that none of what he gave to the world was possible without the constant, disciplined, non-negotiable work of fighting for the integrity of his own interior life. He fought for himself, his clarity, his values, his peace of mind, precisely so that what he gave outward was genuinely worth giving. This is the Stoic case for fighting for yourself. Not at the expense of others, but as the foundation from which everything given to others has actual worth. A person who has abandoned themselves has nothing real to give. They have performance. They have compulsive giving driven by fear rather than love. They have the hollow generosity of someone who has learned to confuse self-erasure with virtue. But a person who fights for themselves, who protects their inner life, defends their standards, honors their time, speaks their truth, pursues their dreams with genuine commitment, that person gives from a place of genuine fullness. And what comes from fullness is real. It lasts. It actually helps. We have covered serious ground. We have named the particular exhaustion that comes from fighting everyone's battles but your own. We have looked honestly at the conditioning that produced it, and refused to use that conditioning as an excuse to continue. We have defined what fighting for yourself actually means, in the real and daily and unglamorous sense. We have identified the 4 ways self-abandonment happens quietly, over time, without fanfare. And we have grounded all of it in the philosophical tradition that understands, perhaps better than any other, that the most important fight of your life is the one happening inside you. But we are only halfway through. Because understanding the problem, even understanding it with complete clarity, is still just the beginning. There is a conversation you have been postponing. Not with anyone else. With yourself. The one where you sit down, completely honestly, without the usual defenses and justifications and compassionate explanations for everyone else's behavior, and you ask the question that changes everything. When was the last time I fought for myself the way I fight for everyone else? Not the last time you treated yourself. Not the last time you took a day off or bought something nice or did something that felt good in the moment. Those things matter, but they are not what we are talking about. We are talking about the last time you defended your dream against the encroachment of everyone else's demands. The last time you protected your peace with the same fierce energy you bring to protecting other people's feelings. The last time you said, with your whole chest, without drowning it in apology, "This is what I need, and I am not negotiating it away." If you have to think for a long time to remember, that is your answer. And that answer is where part 2 begins. The decision that precedes everything else. Before the practices. Before the disciplines. Before the concrete daily mechanics of what it looks like to fight for yourself, there is a decision that must be made. And it is a decision that cannot be made halfway. The decision is this: I am worth fighting for. Not as an affirmation you say to yourself in the mirror. Not as a concept you intellectually agree with. But as a lived, operational, daily choices reflecting conviction that your life, your specific, unrepeatable, irreplaceable life, deserves the same quality of fierce, protective, committed energy that you have been directing outward for years. This decision is harder than it sounds. Because for many people who have spent years fighting for everyone else, the idea of fighting for themselves carries a weight of guilt that feels almost physical. There is a voice, familiar, persistent, often sounding suspiciously like someone from your past, that interprets self-advocacy as selfishness. That reads the protection of your own needs as a betrayal of the people who have come to rely on your self-abandonment. That voice is not wisdom. It is conditioning. And conditioning, however deeply embedded, is not destiny. A man named Emeka had that voice. Loud and constant and fluent in the specific language of his guilt. He had grown up as the eldest son in a family where the eldest son carried everything, the expectations, the responsibility, the emotional weight of a household that had learned to distribute its burdens unevenly and call it love. By 35, Emeka was exhausted in the way we described in part 1. The bone-deep, sleep-resistant, sourceless exhaustion of someone who has been carrying weight that was never entirely his to carry. He came across a question in a book that stopped him completely. The question was, if you treated your best friend the way you treat yourself, would you still have that friendship? Emeka sat with that question for 3 days. Because the answer, honest and uncomfortable and impossible to rationalize away, was no. He would never tell his best friend that his dreams were impractical. He would never tell his best friend that his needs were too demanding. He would never tell his best friend to keep quiet, keep giving, keep absorbing, keep sacrificing, and call it virtue. He would fight for his best friend. With the same ferocity, the same creativity, the same refusal to accept less than they deserved, that he had been pouring into everyone except himself for 35 years. The decision to fight for yourself begins with this recognition. That you deserve from yourself what you would demand from the world for someone you love. That the standards of care and commitment and fierce protection that you apply outward, those same standards apply to you. Fully. Without exception. Without the asterisk of guilt that has been quietly undermining every attempt you have made to prioritize your own life. Make the decision. Completely. And then, build the practice. Fighting for your time, the first front. Time is the first front because it is the most visible. The most measurable. The most immediately revealing of where your actual priorities live, as opposed to where you say your priorities live. There is a simple exercise I want to offer you. At the end of this week, look back at how your hours were actually spent. Not how you planned to spend them. How you actually spent them. Where did your attention go? Whose needs consumed your morning? Whose crisis reorganized your afternoon? Whose comfort took the hours you had mentally reserved for the work that matters to you? Most people, when they do this exercise honestly, discover something that is both clarifying and sobering. The distribution of their time bears almost no relationship to the distribution of their stated values. They say their dream matters, but the dream got 4 hours this week. They say their health matters, but the workout got cancelled 3 times to accommodate someone else's urgency. They say their peace matters, but their evenings were spent processing someone else's emotional landscape instead of restoring their own. Fighting for your time means closing the gap between what you say matters and how your hours are actually allocated. This requires the discipline of the scheduled commitment to yourself, and I want to be very specific about what this means. It means that the time you have decided to spend on your own life, your work, your health, your restoration, your dreams, gets the same status in your schedule as a meeting with someone else. It is not moved because something comes up. It is not sacrificed because someone needs you. It is not the first thing cut when the week gets complicated. It is non-negotiable. Because you are non-negotiable. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius with an urgency that still vibrates across 2 millennia, Vindica te tibi. Reclaim yourself for yourself. He was talking about time. About the hours that slip away, given to other people's demands, stolen by distraction, surrendered to the noise of the world, while the life you actually wanted waits, patiently and then less patiently, for you to show up for it. Reclaim yourself for yourself. Starting with your hours. Because the person who does not fight for their time will discover, too late, that the years went with it. Fighting for your relationships, the second front. This is the front that costs the most socially. And it is the one where most people's resolve breaks down, because fighting for yourself within your relationships means something that our conditioning has trained us to experience as dangerous. It means disappointing people. Not cruelly. Not recklessly. But honestly, in the way that anyone who is living with genuine integrity will inevitably disappoint people who were built comfortable around their self-abandonment. When you stop being infinitely available, someone will feel the change. When you start saying no to things that cost you more than they give, someone will call it selfishness. When you begin defending your time and your energy and your emotional bandwidth with the same conviction that you once gave away freely, the people who benefited most from your giving will often be the first to characterize the change as a problem. Let them. This is not callousness. This is the sober recognition that your growth will always be disorienting to the people who were comfortable in your smallness. That your self-respect will always look like arrogance to the people who built their confidence on your self-doubt. That your boundaries will always feel like rejection to the people who mistook your boundarylessness for love. It was not love. It was fear. And fear-based giving produces fear-based relationships, ones that are stable only as long as you remain afraid to ask for anything in return. Real relationships, the ones built on genuine mutuality, on honest reciprocity, on the solid ground of two people who respect themselves and therefore can respect each other, those relationships do not require your self-erasure. They do not need you to be smaller to make room for someone else's comfort. They expand when you expand. They deepen when you become more honestly, fully yourself. Fight for those relationships. And release, with compassion, but without prolonged anguish, the ones that only survive on the condition of your self-abandonment. A woman named Nkechi had a friendship that had lasted 11 years. 11 years of history, of shared memories, of a closeness that felt like family. And 11 years of a dynamic that had quietly, consistently, required Nkechi to make herself smaller, her needs less visible, her discomforts less expressed, her boundaries less enforced, in order to maintain the peace that her friend required. When Nkechi began fighting for herself, when she started speaking her needs out loud and declining things that cost her too much, the friendship did not survive the change. And Nkechi grieved it. Genuinely, fully, without pretending it didn't hurt. But she told me something that I want to give to you directly. She said, I lost the friendship. But I found myself. And I found that I had been so lonely inside that friendship, lonelier than I have been for a single day since it ended. Fight for the relationships that can hold the full weight of who you actually are. Let go of the ones that can only hold a version of you that requires you to disappear. Fighting for your dream, the third front. This front is personal. And it is urgent. Because your dream, the specific, particular, deeply personal thing that you came here to do or build or become, has a relationship with time that no other aspect of your life has. Everything else can be recovered or rebuilt or reconfigured. Health can be restored. Relationships can be repaired. Money can be re-earned. But time cannot be recovered. And the dream that lives in the future, always just after the current set of obligations settles, is a dream that is aging. That is becoming, year by year, less connected to the version of you that is alive right now, full of the specific energy and vision and urgency of this particular season of your life. Your dream does not have infinite patience. Neither do you. There was a man named Khalid who had wanted to write since he was 19 years old. He was now 43. And in the 24 years between 19 and 43, he had fought brilliantly, for his family's stability, for his company's success, for his colleagues' growth, for his community's needs. He had been, by every external measure, a remarkable fighter. But he had not written a single page. Not because he lacked talent. He had pages inside him, anyone who spoke to him for more than an hour could feel them, pressing against the surface of every conversation, alive and urgent and absolutely ready. He hadn't written because every time the opportunity arrived, someone else's need arrived first. And he had trained himself, with 24 years of practice, to treat other people's needs as automatically more urgent than his own creative life. At 43, something shifted. His youngest child left for university. The house went quiet in a way it hadn't been for 2 decades. And in that quiet, unexpected, almost disorienting, Khalid sat down at his desk. And he started fighting. For the pages. For the hours. For the ferocious, non-negotiable commitment to showing up for the thing he had been postponing for 24 years. He finished his first manuscript at 45. It was not too late. It is never too late, as long as you are breathing and willing to begin. But here is what Claude told anyone who would listen in the years after. I wish I had started fighting for this at 30. At 25. At 19, when I first knew. Not because the work would have been better. But because I would have spent fewer years being a stranger to myself. Do not spend another year being a stranger to yourself. Fight for the dream. Today. With the time you have. In the imperfect, incomplete, not yet ready conditions of your actual life. The conditions will never be perfect. The dream is not waiting for perfect conditions. It is waiting for you to decide it is worth fighting for. The guilt, and what to do with it. I want to address this directly because it would be dishonest to talk about fighting for yourself without talking about the guilt that will come with it. Reliably. Persistently. In the voice of every person who ever benefited from your self-abandonment and called it love. The guilt is real. I am not going to tell you it isn't. I am not going to give you a technique for making it disappear. But I am going to tell you something about guilt that changes its relationship to your decisions. Guilt is not a verdict. It is a feeling. And feelings, as the Stoics understood with extraordinary clarity, are not facts. They are data, sometimes accurate, sometimes the echo of old conditioning, sometimes the nervous system's protest against a change that is necessary but unfamiliar. When you begin fighting for yourself, when you say no to something you would once have said yes to, when you protect your time, when you speak a truth that would once have been swallowed, the guilt that arrives is almost never the guilt of having done something wrong. It is the discomfort of having done something new. There is a difference between those two things. And learning to tell them apart is one of the most important skills you will ever develop. Ask yourself, with genuine honesty, whether what you are doing violates your actual values. Whether it causes genuine harm to someone who does not deserve it. Whether it is an act of cruelty disguised as self-preservation. If the honest answer is no, if what you are doing is simply the reasonable, dignified, long overdue act of treating your own life as worthy of your best effort, then the guilt is not a stop sign. It is a growing pain. And growing pains, uncomfortable as they are the sensation of becoming. Let yourself become. What the fighter for themselves looks like. I want to paint the portrait one final time. Not of a perfect person. Not of someone who has arrived at some static, fully achieved state of self-prioritization. But of someone who is in the daily, imperfect, deeply committed practice of fighting for themselves. This person wakes up and gives the first hour of their day to themselves. Not to their phone. Not to someone else's emergency. To the work, the practice, the restoration, the dream that belongs entirely to them. This person says no, not always comfortably, not always without the familiar pull of guilt, but consistently, and without the extended apology that used to follow every boundary. They say it, and they let it stand. This person has relationships that feel different from the ones they used to keep. Less dramatic. Less consuming. Less defined by the particular electricity of being needed. But deeper. More honest. More genuinely nourishing. Built on the solid ground of mutual respect rather than the shifting sand of one person's endless accommodation. This person is in active, daily relationship with their dream. Not waiting for the perfect moment. Not saving it for when everything else settles. Giving it real hours, real energy, real commitment, the same quality of attention they once gave automatically to everyone else. This person still gives. Generously. Genuinely. Without the hidden tax of martyrdom or the silent accumulation of resentment that used to follow every act of generosity. Because what they give now comes from a place of actual fullness, not from the desperate compulsion of someone who has confused self-erasure with virtue. This person is tired sometimes. Imperfect always. Still learning, still adjusting, still navigating the complex and deeply human territory of loving others without losing themselves in the process. But this person is no longer a stranger to themselves. And that quality of being genuinely known to yourself, genuinely inhabited, genuinely at home in your own life, is worth every uncomfortable conversation, every disappointed expectation, every moment of guilt that turned out to be nothing more than the sound of your old life protesting its own ending. The fight starts now. You have been waiting for the right moment to start fighting for yourself. This is it. Not next month. Not after the project ends. Not when the kids are older or the relationship is more stable or the circumstances are more forgiving. Now. With the life you actually have. In the conditions that actually exist. With the imperfect, complicated, deeply worthy reality of who you actually are. Marcus Aurelius, on the days when Rome demanded everything, when the weight of an empire pressed on every decision, still found his way back to his journal. Still found his way back to the fight for his own clarity, his own values, his own integrity of thought and action. Not because it was easy. Because he understood that without it, everything else he gave was built on nothing. You are not the emperor of Rome. But you are the emperor of your own life. The sovereign authority over the one territory that actually belongs to you, your time, your energy, your voice, your dream, your interior world. Fight for that territory. With the same ferocity you have spent years directing outward. With the same creativity and commitment and refusal to give up that you have brought to every battle you ever fought for. This is the Stoic path. And you, finally, fully, fiercely fighting for yourself, are exactly where you were always meant to be.